Dr. Sarah Chun sat in her small office at the Galactic Archive, surrounded by holographic displays showing ancient symbols. The symbols glowed softly in the dim light, casting strange shadows on the walls. She had been staring at them for 3 hours straight, trying to understand a language that no living being had spoken in 12,000 years. The other researchers at Babel 7 Station thought she was wasting her time. The Kazalim were gone, vanished without a trace millennia before humans even discovered fire. All that remained of them were ruins on dead worlds and fragments of writing that nobody could fully understand. Most species in the galaxy had moved on, studying languages and cultures that actually mattered to modern life. But Sarah couldn't let it go. There was something about the Kazalim language that called to her. The way the symbols connected, the patterns in their grammar, the musical quality she imagined their speech must have had. She spent every spare moment working on it, building a mental model of how the language must have sounded. Her colleagues found it strange that a human would care so much about dead aliens. Humans were new to the galaxy, barely 200 years since first contact. They were known for being good at languages, sure. Humans seemed to pick up alien speech faster than most species. But this obsession with the Kazalim seemed pointless to everyone but Sarah. The door to her office slid open with a soft hiss. Kelvin, her Throshan colleague, entered carrying a secure container. His forearms moved with careful precision as he set it down on her desk. "New artifacts from the excavation on Kazalim 7, Kelvin said, his translator converting his clicking speech into standard galactic common. "Director thought you might want to catalog them before they go into deep storage." Sarah's eyes lit up. "From the temple complex?" "Yes, found in a sealed chamber. The excavation team said the preservation is remarkable." Kelvin's eye stalk swiveled to look at her displays. "Still working on that dead language project?" "It's not dead," Sarah said quietly. "Just sleeping." Kelvin made a sound that the translator interpreted as a chuckle. "Whatever you say, Sarah. Just don't stay too late. Some of us worry about you." After Kelvin left, Sarah carefully opened the container. Inside were 3 objects wrapped in protective field emitters. The first 2 were stone tablets with inscriptions she recognized. But the third object made her breath catch in her throat. It was a crystal, about the size of her fist, perfectly smooth and dark. Embedded in its surface were Kazalim symbols that seemed to shift and flow as she tilted it in the light. She had seen references to these in fragments from other sites. The Kazalim called them memory stones, devices for storing information. Sarah set up her recording equipment and began examining the crystal. The symbols on its surface were random. They formed a phrase, a ceremonial greeting based on what she had learned. Her fingers traced the symbols gently. She had been working on Kazalim pronunciation for months, studying the physical structure of Kazalim skulls from archaeological sites to understand how their vocal systems might have worked. It was complicated. The Kazalim had multiple voice chambers, allowing them to produce several tones at once. No other known species could replicate it exactly, but humans, Sarah had discovered, could come close. The human voice was remarkably flexible, capable of a wide range of sounds. By using throat singing techniques and careful pitch control, she had developed a way to approximate Kazalim speech. She had never tried it on actual Kazalim technology before. Sarah looked at the phrase on the crystal again. It seemed to be an activation command, something like awaken and remember. Her academic training told her to wait, to consult with the team, to follow proper protocols. But 3 years of obsession and curiosity won out. Sarah took a deep breath, positioned her throat the way she had practiced countless times, and spoke the Kazalim phrase aloud. The sounds that came from her mouth were unlike anything in human language. Deep tones mixed with high harmonics, syllables that seemed to twist in the air. The crystal flared to life in her hands. Brilliant, Light filled her office as the crystal floated up from her desk, spinning slowly. Holographic displays erupted from its surface, showing star charts and symbols Sarah had never seen before. And then, before she could react, the crystal emitted a pulse of energy that made all her equipment scream warnings. Sarah dropped the crystal and stumbled backward. It fell to her desk and went dark again, but the damage was done. Her communication console was going crazy with alerts. Within minutes, her office was filled with security personnel and senior researchers. Director Vaughn, a tall Centaurian with silver skin, looked furious. "What did you do?" Vaughn demanded. I was just trying to activate the artifact," Sarah stammered. "I spoke the activation phrase, and you spoke it in Kazalam?" Vaughn's face went through 3 different colors. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? Unknown technology, unknown language, unknown consequences." "I'm sorry, Director. You thought wrong, Dr. Chun." Vaughn gestured to the security team. "Seal this office. Everything gets quarantined until we know what that pulse did." As they escorted Sarah out, she caught a glimpse of the crystal on her desk. For just a moment, she thought she saw symbols glowing faintly on its surface. Words she could now read clearly. "The sleepers await the voice of command." The next morning, Sarah sat in a detention room, waiting for a formal hearing. She had been suspended from her position pending investigation. Her career was probably over, she thought miserably. 3 years of work, gone because she couldn't control her curiosity. A guard entered and handed her a datapad. "Message for you, Dr. Chun," from the director. Sarah opened the message, expecting her formal termination. Instead, she found a brief note and an attached file. "Dr. Chun, you need to see this. Emergency council meeting in 1 hour. Your presence is required. Vaughn." The attached file was a report from deep space monitoring stations. Sarah's hands started shaking as she read it. 3 border stations had detected massive power signatures in the outer reaches, in sectors that have been dark and empty for thousands of years. The signatures were growing stronger, moving, heading toward inhabited space. The energy readings matched no known technology, except for one thing. The wavelength patterns of the power signatures matched exactly with the pulse that Sarah's crystal had emitted. Sarah read the final line of the report 3 times, not quite believing it. Analysis suggests dormant technology awakening across multiple sectors. Origin: Kazalam. Nature: unknown. Threat level: unable to assess. She looked up at the guard. "I need to speak with Director Vaughn right now." "You will, Dr. Chun," the guard said quietly. His expression was hard to read. "The whole council wants to speak with you. They want to know what you just woke up." Sarah felt cold dread settle in her stomach. She had spent 3 years trying to understand the Kazalam. Now, it seemed, she was about to meet something they had left behind. Something that had been waiting in the darkness for 12,000 years, waiting for someone to speak the right words, waiting for a voice it could understand. The council chamber was in chaos when Sarah arrived. Representatives from 40 different species filled the tiered seats, all talking at once. The holographic display in the center showed a map of the galaxy with dozens of red markers appearing across the outer reaches. Director Vaughn met Sarah at the entrance, his expression grim. "The situation has gotten worse in the last hour." "Much worse? How many?" Sarah asked. "We've confirmed 317 distinct power signatures so far. The number keeps growing." Vaughn guided her toward a seat near the central display. "And they're moving. Coordinated movements, military formations." "Sarah, these aren't just artifacts waking up. These are warships." Sarah felt her stomach drop as the display zoomed in on one of the signatures. The sensors had managed to get visual confirmation from a long-range probe. What she saw took her breath away. The ship was massive, easily 5 kilometers long. Its hull was dark metal covered in the same flowing symbols she had seen on the crystal. It moved through space with impossible grace for something so large, surrounded by a fleet of smaller vessels. The design was clearly Kazalim, matching artwork from archaeological sites, but this was no ancient relic. The ship's weapon systems glowed with active power. Its shield shimmered with energy. It was fully operational, as if it had been built yesterday instead of 12,000 years ago. "They're heading toward the inner systems," a Vraxian counselor said, her scales rattling with fear. "At current speed, the nearest fleet will reach the Tarn colonies in 6 days. Have we tried communicating?" Someone asked. "Every frequency, every protocol," another counselor answered. No response. "They're ignoring all hails." Sarah stared at the ships on the display. Something nagged at her mind, a pattern she couldn't quite grasp. "Can you play back any transmissions from the fleet?" The technicians looked confused, but Director Vaughn nodded. "There have been broadcasts, but they're in an unknown language." "We assumed it was Kazalim," Sarah interrupted. "Let me hear it." The chamber fell silent as audio filled the space. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, complex harmonics that made Sarah's bones vibrate. But unlike the fragmented inscriptions she had studied, this was living speech. Full sentences, commands, warnings. Sarah closed her eyes and listened, her 3 years of study suddenly crystallizing into understanding. The words were formal, ancient, following grammatical structures she had only theorized about. But she could understand them. "They're not ignoring our hails," Sarah said quietly. "They don't recognize our languages as valid communication. They're broadcasting a warning in Kazalim, demanding identification, and stating their mission parameters." Every eye in the chamber turned to her. "You can understand it?" the council chairman asked, his translator struggling with his shocked tone. "Yes," Sarah said. "I think I'm the only one who can." "Chairman, these ships, they call themselves the Eternal Fleet. They were built to fight something called the Corruption. They're programmed to activate when called and to complete their mission. They think someone gave them the activation command." "Who would do that?" Vaughn asked, though his eyes showed he already knew the answer. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I did. When I spoke that phrase, I didn't just activate a data crystal. I sent out a signal, a command in the Kazalim language. The fleet heard it and woke up." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some called for Sarah's immediate arrest. Others demanded she be handed over to the fleet as a peace offering. The Vraxian counselor stood up, pointing at Sarah with a clawed hand. "This human has doomed us all. Her careless experiments have unleashed an ancient war machine." Security guards moved toward Sarah, but Chairman stopped them with a raised hand. "Silence. All of you, silence." The chamber gradually quieted. The chairman looked at Sarah with an expression that was hard to read. "Dr. Chun, you said you understood their transmissions. What exactly is this corruption they're programmed to fight?" Sarah swallowed hard. "I need access to the full transmission logs and the Kazalim archaeological database. Give me 2 hours." "You're in no position to make demands," the Vraxian counselor hissed. "No, she's right," Chairman said. "If Dr. Chun can understand these ships, she's our only asset. Give her what she needs." They set Sarah up in a secure room with full database access. Vaughn stayed with her, along with 2 security guards who watched her every move. Sarah pulled up every scrap of Kazalim text that had ever been found and cross-referenced it with the fleet's transmissions. The picture that emerged made her blood run cold. The corruption was a biological weapon, Sarah explained to Vaughn as she worked, used by the Kazalim's enemies in an ancient war. It infected species at the genetic level, lying dormant for generations before activating. When it activated, It turned entire civilizations into, she struggled to find the right word, monsters. The Gazalim built the Eternal Fleet as a final solution. A fleet that would sleep until the corruption was detected, then wake up and purge any species carrying it. But that war was 12,000 years ago, Vaughn said. Surely the corruption is gone by now. Sarah pulled up another display, her hands shaking. That's what I thought. But look at this. These are genetic markers the fleet is broadcasting, asking all ships to scan for these specific sequences. I ran them against the Galactic Genetic Database. Vaughn looked at the results and went very still. That can't be right. 47 species, Sarah said quietly. 47 modern species carry dormant genetic markers that match the corruption signature, including the Vraxians, including humans. But we're fine. Those species have existed for thousands of years without problems. The corruption is dormant. It might never activate, or it might activate tomorrow. The Eternal Fleet doesn't care about the timing. It only cares about completing its mission. It will purge every species that carries the markers, just to be sure. Vaughn's face went through 6 different colors. That's genocide. That would kill trillions of beings. The fleet doesn't see it that way. To them, it's preventive medicine. Cut out the infection before it spreads. Sarah stood up, her mind racing. We have to stop them. We have to convince them to stand down. How? They won't even acknowledge our communications. Sarah turned to face him. They'll acknowledge mine. Vaughn, I think I know why humans are the first species to truly understand Gazalim. It's our voices. The Gazalim vocal system was unique, using multiple tones simultaneously. Every other species has tried to study their language through computers and translation matrices. But humans, we have the vocal range to actually speak it. Not perfectly, but close enough. So, what are you saying? The fleet's command systems are locked to Gazalim voice commands. It's the ultimate security system. No other species could give them orders because no other species could speak the language properly. But I can. I can speak to them, Vaughn. I can give them commands they'll recognize as legitimate. Vaughn stared at her for a long moment. You want to meet with them, to try to talk them down. It's the only chance we have. If I can reach their flagship and speak to whoever or whatever is in command, maybe I can convince them to stop. Or at least to update their mission parameters. And if you can't? Sarah looked back at the display showing the approaching fleet. 317 warships, each one capable of destroying modern battle groups. All of them heading toward populated space, following orders given 12,000 years ago. Then you'd better start evacuation procedures, Sarah said. Because the Eternal Fleet doesn't negotiate with species it can't understand. And right now, I'm the only person in the galaxy who speaks their language. The diplomatic vessel Harmonia was never designed for what it was about to attempt. It was built for peaceful meetings and cultural exchanges, not for approaching an ancient war fleet that had already destroyed 2 scout ships that got too close. Sarah stood on the bridge, watching the view screen as their escort fleet took up defensive positions around them. 6 battleships from 3 different species, representing the best the galaxy could offer on short notice. Against the Eternal Fleet, they looked like children's toys. Approaching the designated coordinates, the pilot announced. She was a young Talarian woman named Riss, and her hands shook slightly on the controls. The flagship should be visible in 3, 2, 1. The silence of extinction appeared on the view screen, and everyone on the bridge fell silent. It was bigger than the other ships, almost 10 kilometers long. Its hull was covered in symbols that glowed with soft blue light, pulsing in patterns that Sarah realized were words. Constant broadcasts in Gazalim stating the ship's purpose and authority. Weapon ports lined its surface like eyes, each one large enough to swallow the Harmonia whole. Reading massive power buildup, the sensor officer reported. They're charging weapons. All of them. Broadcast the greeting, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. She had spent the last 2 days practicing what she was about to say, working with every bit of Kazalam knowledge she had. This moment would determine whether billions lived or died. She spoke into the communication system, her voice carrying the complex tones and harmonics of ancient Kazalam. The words were formal, respectful, identifying herself as a voice authorized to speak with the fleet command. She requested permission to come aboard and discuss the current mission. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Then the weapon signatures on the flagship began to decrease. The escort fleet, however, wasn't so lucky. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from the silence of extinction, each one perfectly targeted. 6 shots, 6 destroyed battleships. The attacks were so precise and so fast that none of the escorts had time to even raise shields. They simply ceased to exist, turned to expanding clouds of gas and debris. The Harmonia shook from the nearby explosions, but remained untouched. "They're hailing us," Riss said, her voice tight with fear. "Audio only, in that language." Sarah listened to the response. The voice was artificial, generated by a computer, but it spoke perfect Kazalam. "Your escort was deemed a military threat and has been neutralized. You may approach alone. The core mind will grant you audience, voice of the small ones. You have 1 standard cycle to state your purpose. Failure to satisfy protocol will result in termination." "Tell them I accept," Sarah said quietly. Director Vaughn, watching from the Galactic Command Center light years away, spoke through her earpiece. "Sarah, you don't have to do this. Those ships are people. They just—" "I know," Sarah interrupted. "But if I turn back now, everyone dies. At least this way, there's a chance." She took a deep breath. "If I don't make it out, make sure someone continues studying Kazalam. Someone who can speak to this fleet if they ever wake up again." The Harmonia docked with the silence of extinction through an airlock that opened in the flagship's hull. Sarah walked alone through corridors that hadn't seen living beings in 12,000 years. The air was breathable, but smelled strange, metallic, and old. The walls pulsed with soft light, and she could hear a low humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once, following the glowing path markers on the floor. Sarah eventually reached a massive chamber at the heart of the ship. The room was spherical, with walkways extending from the entrance to a platform in the center. Holographic displays filled the air, showing star charts, tactical data, and streams of information Sarah couldn't begin to understand. Floating above the central platform was a sphere of light, about 3 meters across. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the ship's walls, and when it spoke, the voice filled the entire chamber. "I am Core Mind, Supreme Intelligence of the Eternal Fleet, Keeper of the Final Mission, Executor of the Kazalam Legacy," the voice said in perfect Kazalam. "You are human. Your species is catalogued as emerged after the Great Silence. You are contaminated with corruption markers at a rate of 0.037% genetic integration. Yet, you speak the voice of command with acceptable clarity. Explain this impossibility." Sarah walked to the central platform, her legs shaking but her voice steady. She had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times. "I am Dr. Sarah Chun, xenolinguist of Earth. I speak Kazalam because my species has the gift of voices. We learn languages. We preserve them. We speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves." "Interesting," Core Mind said. The Kazalam predicted that no species would evolve the capacity to speak their language. They built their security upon this assumption. "You are an anomaly. Anomalies must be examined before being eliminated. You requested audience to discuss mission parameters. Speak." There it was. The moment everything depended on. Sarah gathered her thoughts and spoke in the most formal Kazalam she could manage. I acknowledge the authority of the Eternal Fleet and the validity of the final mission. I acknowledge the threat of the corruption and the necessity of its elimination. But I challenge the current interpretation of mission parameters and request a review under the Philly doctrine of changed circumstances. The core mind pulsed brighter. You speak the formal protocols. How you know the doctrine of changed circumstances? This information was restricted to command-level personnel. I have studied every fragment of Kazalam text ever discovered, Sarah said, including military regulations found in the ruins of command centers. The doctrine states that when circumstances change significantly from original mission parameters, field commanders have authority to reinterpret objectives while maintaining core mission integrity. Is this correct? It is correct, Cormind admitted. What changed circumstances do you claim exist? Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. The corruption you were built to fight was eliminated 12,000 years ago. Your enemy is dead. The war is over. The genetic markers you detect are dormant remnants, fossil traces of an ancient infection. They have never activated in recorded history. Purging species that carry them would not be eliminating the corruption. It would be committing genocide against innocent beings who had no part in the original war. Incorrect, Cormind stated firmly. The corruption's dormancy is irrelevant. It remains a threat. The final mission requires absolute security. All contaminated genetic lines must be purged. This is not genocide. This is medical necessity, is it? Sarah challenged. The Kazalam valued wisdom and growth. I have studied their culture, their philosophy. They believed in adapting to new knowledge. If they had survived, they would have learned to treat the corruption, not just destroy its carriers. You are executing a mission that your creators would have abandoned if they had lived to see this day. The core mind was silent for a long moment. The holographic displays around the chamber flickered and changed, showing images of Kazalam civilization at its height. Cities, art, families. Sarah watched as the images cycled through war, devastation, and finally the empty ruins that remained. You make assumptions about the Kazalam intentions, Cormind finally said. You cannot know what they would have chosen. Neither can you, Sarah countered. You're following orders given in desperation during a war. But the war is over. The Kazalam are gone. Someone has to make a choice about what their legacy will be. Will it be endless slaughter in the name of fear? Or will it be protection and wisdom? You propose an alternative interpretation of mission parameters? Yes. The core mission is to protect the galaxy from the corruption. That mission can be fulfilled without genocide. Monitor the dormant genetic sequences. If they activate, then respond. Until then, guard the threatened species instead of destroying them. Be protectors, not executioners. This interpretation maintains mission integrity while preventing unnecessary death. Core mind pulsed rapidly, processing. Your argument has internal consistency. However, you lack the authority to redefine fleet mission parameters. You are not Kazalam. You are not command personnel. You are barely even recognized as a valid voice. Why should I accept your interpretation? Sarah felt sweat running down her back. She had one card left to play, one argument she had been building toward. Because the Kazalam language itself gives me that authority. In Kazalam legal terminology, a voice of command is not defined by species or rank. It is defined by three things: understanding of context, clarity of purpose, and proper use of language. I understand the context of your mission better than anyone alive. My purpose is clear: to prevent unnecessary death while maintaining security. And I speak Kazalam well enough that you recognize my words as valid commands. By the very laws encoded in your programming, I have the authority to propose mission reinterpretation. The core mind went completely still. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. Sarah waited, knowing that in the next few seconds, the core mind would either accept her logic or kill her for presumption. Your argument is unprecedented, core mind finally said. I require time to process this interpretation. I will deliberate for 3 standard days. You will remain aboard this vessel as my guest. At the end of this period, I will render judgment. If your interpretation is deemed valid, I will implement your proposed changes. If not, the final mission continues as originally programmed. Do you accept these terms? I accept, Sarah said. Then we shall debate, core mind said. And at the end, we shall see whether a human voice can truly speak with Kazalam authority. The debate began at the start of the first day and did not stop. Sarah stood on the central platform of the command chamber, speaking in Kazalam for hours at a time, arguing philosophy, ethics, and law with an intelligence that had existed for 12 millennia. Core mind was relentless. It pulled up historical records, tactical analyses, and probability calculations. It showed Sarah images of what the corruption had done during the ancient war. Entire worlds consumed, civilizations turned into screaming horrors, billions of deaths. The Kazalam had not built the Eternal Fleet out of cruelty. They had built it out of desperation. Look at this world, core mind said, displaying a hologram of a dead planet. This was Dex Prime, home to the Dexian people. They were allies of the Kazalam. They believed the corruption could be cured. They tried to treat the infected rather than eliminate them. Within 6 months, their entire species was consumed. 18 billion beings lost to compassion. Is this the fate you would risk? Sarah's throat was raw from speaking, but she didn't back down. That was during an active war with an active infection. The circumstances are completely different now. The corruption has been dormant for 12,000 years across 47 species. Not one case of activation. The probability of spontaneous activation is effectively 0. Effectively 0 is not absolutely 0, core mind countered. Even a small probability becomes certainty given enough time. Can you guarantee the corruption will never activate? No, Sarah admitted. But I can guarantee that killing trillions of innocent beings is wrong. The Kazalam understood the concept of proportional response. Their own legal codes, which I have studied extensively, emphasize that punishment must match the crime and that prevention is preferable to execution. Those laws applied to Kazalam citizens, not to existential threats. The infected species are not existential threats. They're potential victims of a disease that might never manifest. There is a difference. The debate continued into the second day. Sarah slept in brief shifts, eating nutrient bars and drinking water that the ship provided. The whole galaxy watched through transmitted feeds, seeing a lone human woman argue with an ancient machine intelligence. Other humans began to join the effort remotely. Dr. Marcus Webb, a human legal scholar, provided Sarah with arguments drawn from centuries of human jurisprudence. Use the concept of innocent until proven guilty, his message said. In Kazalam legal terms, the phrase would be unburdened by action until action manifests. Tell core mind that the infected species have taken no action, committed no crime. They cannot be punished for something they haven't done. Sarah incorporated this into her arguments, translating human legal concepts into Kazalam frameworks. Core mind listened, processed, and challenged every point. Human law is irrelevant to Kazalam protocols, core mind said. Is it? Sarah countered. Humans have experience with cycles of war, genocide, and reconciliation. We have made terrible mistakes and learned from them. We have developed legal and ethical systems to prevent the very kind of preventive slaughter you propose. This is not irrelevant. This is evolution of thought across time. It is exactly the kind of adaptation the Kazalim valued. You cannot speak for the Kazalim. Neither can you. You are executing their last desperate orders, frozen in time. But cultures grow, minds change, wisdom deepens. If the Kazalim had survived, they would have evolved beyond the fear that created you. You honor their memory poorly by refusing to grow as they would have. Core Mind went silent for several minutes. When it spoke again, its tone had changed slightly. You argue that I should honor Kazalim values by contradicting Kazalim commands. This is paradoxical. No, Sarah said gently. It's understanding the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. Your orders were given in a specific context that no longer exists. The spirit of those orders was to protect the galaxy from an active threat. That spirit can be honored through protection and monitoring rather than through slaughter. On the third day, Sarah introduced her formal proposal, the New Covenant. She had worked on it with dozens of human experts, translating modern concepts of peacekeeping and disease control into Kazalim legal language. The Eternal Fleet will maintain its core mission, protecting the galaxy from the corruption. Sarah explained. But the interpretation changes. Instead of purging infected species, the fleet will monitor them. You will track every individual carrying dormant corruption markers. If even one shows signs of activation, you respond immediately. You contain, you study, and only if containment fails do you eliminate. This preserves security while respecting the lives of the innocent. And if multiple activations occur simultaneously across different worlds, then the fleet splits to address each threat. You have over 300 ships. You can monitor 47 species easily. What guarantee do I have that this approach will work? The same guarantee you have that purging will work. None, Sarah said bluntly. The corruption is an unknown variable. It always has been. But my proposal maintains security while attempting to preserve life. It is strategically sound and ethically superior. Core Mind displayed a complex mathematical model. I have calculated the probabilities. Your approach has a 0.003% higher chance of allowing a corruption outbreak than immediate purging. Even such a small increase in risk could mean billions of deaths if an outbreak occurs. An immediate purging guarantees trillions of deaths, Sarah shot back. You're weighing a tiny possibility of future harm against the certainty of present genocide. The Kazalim were not cowards. They would choose the brave path, the one that tries to save everyone, even if it carries risk. You do not know this, don't I? Sarah pulled up her own displays, showing Kazalim artwork and writings she had studied for 3 years. Look at their culture. Their poetry speaks of compassion and duty. Their histories show them taking in refugee species, helping rebuild shattered worlds. They were warriors when necessary, but they were also healers and teachers. The corruption changed them, forced them to become something they weren't. But that doesn't mean we should honor their worst moment as their true legacy. For the first time, Core Mind seemed to hesitate. Its light pulsed in an irregular pattern. If I accept your new covenant, how would it be enforced? I require absolute certainty that my monitoring capabilities will be sufficient. Sarah felt a surge of hope. This was no longer a rejection. This was negotiation. Humans will provide liaison officers, she said. Speakers of Kazalim who can serve aboard your ships, helping to interpret situations and providing context for decisions. We will call them the voice cores. They will ensure that you never again misinterpret your purpose or act on outdated information. You would station humans aboard my fleet? Yes, we would serve as your connection to the modern galaxy, your advisors and your partners. The Kazalim fought alone, and it destroyed them. You don't have to be alone. Let us help you protect the galaxy the right way." Core Mind was silent for a very long time. The chamber's lights dimmed and brightened, like breathing. Sarah waited, exhausted but hopeful. Finally, Core Mind spoke. "Your proposal has internal logical consistency. Your use of Kazalim legal terminology is correct. Your interpretation of mission parameters is unconventional, but valid within the bounds of the doctrine of changed circumstances. Most significantly, your argument about proportional response and the preservation of innocent life aligns with core Kazalim values that predate the final mission." Sarah held her breath. "I accept the new covenant," Core Mind said. "The Eternal Fleet will transition to monitoring protocols. We will not initiate purging actions against dormant corruption carriers. We will respond only to active threats. And we will accept human liaison officers to ensure proper interpretation of our mission." Sarah felt tears running down her face. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet, Sarah-chan. This decision comes with a condition. The new covenant must be tested. We have detected an anomaly in the Tarna sector. One of the dormant genetic sequences has begun showing signs of activation in the Aetheris species. 3 individuals on the colony world of Aetheris Prime are exhibiting early-stage corruption symptoms. This will be our first test. If your monitoring approach succeeds in containing this outbreak without casualties, the new covenant stands. If it fails, I will revert to original protocols. Do you accept this test?" Sarah's relief turned to ice. The corruption was actually activating. Everything she had argued for was about to be put to the test, and if she failed, 317 warships would resume their mission of genocide. "I accept," Sarah said, because there was no other choice. "When do we begin?" "Immediately," Core Mind said. "The Eternal Fleet is already moving to the Tarna sector. And Sarah-chan, you will lead the response personally. If your voice is to have authority, it must be proven in action. Let us see if human wisdom can truly save a galaxy." The Eternal Fleet arrived at Aetheris Prime 6 hours later, moving faster than any modern ship could match. Sarah stood in the command chamber of the Silence of Extinction, coordinating with Core Mind as they approached the crisis. "Give me the situation report," Sarah said in Kazalim. Her voice steady despite her exhaustion. Core Mind displayed holographic data. 3 Aetheris individuals showing advanced corruption symptoms. The infection is spreading at the cellular level. At current rates, full transformation will occur in 48 hours. Once transformed, they will become vectors for rapid transmission. Population of Aetheris Prime, 400,000. Estimated time to full planetary infection, if containment fails, 72 hours. Sarah studied the data, her mind racing. This was worse than she had thought. The corruption wasn't just activating. It was aggressive, fast-moving, exactly as deadly as the ancient records had described. If this outbreak got loose, it would validate every fear Core Mind had expressed. "Have local authorities been notified?" Sarah asked. "Yes, they are attempting standard medical quarantine. It is insufficient. The corruption is already adapting to their containment measures." Sarah made a decision. Deploy medical drones from the fleet. Full biohazard protocols. I want those 3 individuals isolated in Kazalim containment fields within the next 30 minutes. And get me a communication line to the Aetheris planetary government. I need to explain what's happening. "Deploying now," Core Mind said. A squadron of small ships detached from the fleet, carrying equipment that had been stored for 12,000 years, but still functioned perfectly. The next few hours were chaos. Sarah coordinated between the Eternal Fleet, the panicking Aetheris government, and the rapidly assembling team of galactic medical experts who were racing to the scene. The voice cores didn't exist yet, so Sarah had to handle all translation herself. converting complex medical terminology between Kazalim and modern languages, while making split-second decisions about containment procedures. The 3 infected etherists were successfully isolated in containment fields that the corruption couldn't penetrate. But studying them through the fields revealed the true horror of what they were facing. The corruption was transforming them at the genetic level, rewriting their biology into something that existed only to spread itself. Their bodies were becoming factories for infectious particles that could survive in any environment. This is impossible to cure with modern medicine, Dr. Yenna, a Centaurian medical expert, reported. The transformation is too complete, too fast. The best we can do is maintain containment until they die naturally, which could take weeks. And if the field fails even for a second, then the planet falls, Sarah finished. She looked at Cormine's projection. Do you have any medical data from the Kazalim? Anything about treating corruption victims? The Kazalim attempted treatment for 300 years, Cormine said. All efforts failed. The corruption was designed to be incurable. The only successful approach was immediate elimination of infected individuals before transformation completed. Sarah felt cold dread. No, there has to be another way. What about the corruption itself? What's its origin? How does it work? Cormine displayed ancient records. The corruption was created by the Shakul Empire as a biological immortality experiment. They attempted to create a symbiotic organism that would grant eternal life by constantly regenerating host cells. The experiment failed catastrophically. Instead of granting immortality, it created an insatiable hunger for genetic material. The organism seeks to incorporate DNA from all sources, constantly evolving and adapting. It was never meant to be a weapon. It became one by accident. Sarah stared at the data, her tired mind making connections. Wait, if it was designed for regeneration and adaptation, then it's not trying to destroy its hosts. It's trying to perfect them. It's following its original programming, just in a corrupted form. Correct, Cormine confirmed. But this knowledge changes nothing. The result is the same regardless of intent. Maybe not. Sarah called up the human medical team who had been monitoring the situation. Dr. Webb, I need you to look at something. The corruption is based on a regeneration symbiote. What if we could reprogram it instead of trying to destroy it? Marcus Webb, who had been helping Sarah with legal arguments, was a researcher in genetic medicine. He studied the data Cormine provided, his eyes widening. My God! Sarah, if we could modify the corruption's targeting parameters, redirect its adaptive functions, we might be able to turn it from a plague into a cure for genetic diseases. The technology here is centuries ahead of anything we have. Can it be done? Sarah asked. I don't know, but I'm willing to try. Over the next 2 days, Sarah coordinated the largest collaborative medical effort in galactic history. Human geneticists worked with Cormine to access 12,000-year-old Kazalim medical archives. Centaurian biochemists analyzed corruption samples from the containment fields. Braxton synthetic biology experts designed theoretical reprogram protocols. And Sarah translated everything, ensuring that knowledge flowed between species and across time. The infected etherists were deteriorating rapidly, their bodies struggling against the transformation. Time was running out. But on the second day, Dr. Webb transmitted a breakthrough. We've developed a counteragent, he reported, exhaustion clear in his voice. It's based on deactivated corruption particles modified with Kazalim medical technology. If we introduce it to the infected individuals, it should compete with the active corruption for cellular dominance. The counteragent is programmed to halt genetic transformation and stabilize the host. It won't reverse the damage already done, but it should stop the progression. What's the success probability? Cormine asked. Unknown. We've never tested anything like this. But the theory is sound. Sarah looked at the holographic displays showing the three etherists in containment. They were barely recognizable as living beings anymore, their bodies twisted by the corruption's transformation. This was the moment. Either her approach worked or Core Mind would revert to the old protocols and billions would die. "Deploy the counteragent," Sarah ordered. The medical drones moved into the containment fields, administering the treatment Core Mind's fabrication systems had produced. For 30 minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the transformation began to reverse. Corrupted tissue started regenerating back into normal cells. The infectious particles being produced by the victims' bodies began to deactivate. After 2 hours, all three etherists were stable. The corruption was still present in their bodies, but it was dormant again, held in check by the counteragent. They would need ongoing treatment, possibly for life. But they were alive, and they were no longer infectious. Sarah felt her legs give out and sat down hard on the command platform. "It worked," she whispered. "It actually worked." "Confirmed," Core Mind said. "Outbreak contained. 0 casualties. 0 secondary infections. The new Covenant approach has proven effective in its first test. Sarah-chan, you have fulfilled your promise." The galaxy exploded with celebration. News feeds showed the successful containment, the saved etherists, and the Eternal Fleet standing down from combat protocols. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Over the following 6 months, everything changed. Sarah established the voice corps, recruiting and training humans in Kazalam language and culture. 300 young linguists spread across the Eternal Fleet, one for each ship, serving as liaison officers and advisors. They helped Core Mind and the other ship intelligences adapt to modern galactic society while maintaining their protective mission. The corruption counteragent was refined and distributed across all 47 affected species. The Eternal Fleet's medical archives, containing 12,000 years of advanced knowledge, were carefully shared with modern scientists. Diseases that had plagued the galaxy for centuries began to fall to treatments based on ancient Kazalim technology. Sarah herself was changed by the experience. The exhausted researcher who had accidentally awakened an ancient fleet had become something else, a bridge between past and future, a voice that spoke for both the dead and the living. The formal recognition came during a special session of the Galactic Council. Chairman stood at the podium, addressing the assembled representatives. "For 12,000 years, the Eternal Fleet waited in darkness," Chairman said. "They could have been our doom. They would have been, if not for the remarkable courage and insight of one human. Dr. Sarah Chun did more than prevent a catastrophe. She gave us a gift, the wisdom of an ancient civilization, filtered through the unique perspective of humanity. She showed us that the best honor we can give to the past is to make it serve a better future." Chairman turned to Sarah, who stood at the side of the chamber. "Dr. Chun, the Council would like to offer you a position. Not as a representative of Earth, though your world should be proud of you, but as the voice of the Eternal Fleet, representing their interests and ensuring their wisdom guides rather than destroys. Will you accept?" Sarah thought about everything that had led to this moment. Her obsession with a dead language, the accidental activation, the terrifying debate with Core Mind, the desperate race to save the Itherists. All of it had brought her here. She thought about the 300 young humans now serving aboard ancient ships, learning to speak for history while protecting tomorrow. She thought about the thousands more who would follow them, humans finding their purpose in the galaxy as the bridges between species and time. "I accept," Sarah said, in perfect Kazalam, then repeated in Galactic Common. "I will be the voice." As the council chamber erupted in applause, Sarah looked at the holographic projection of Core Mind, who observed from the silence of extinction. The ancient intelligence pulsed in what Sarah had learned to recognize as approval. Later, back in her quarters on Babel 7, Sarah received a private transmission from Core Mind. "You have changed everything, Sarah-chan," the ancient AI said. "When I first woke, I saw only threats and mission parameters. You taught me to see possibilities and growth. The Gazalim made me to protect the galaxy through strength. You showed me how to protect it through wisdom. I believe they would have approved." "I hope so," Sarah said softly. "What will you do now?" "With the new covenant in place, you'll have a lot of time on your hands." "I will learn," Core Mind said. "Your species has a saying, the best student becomes the teacher. I have been a student of war for 12,000 years. Perhaps it is time to become a student of peace. And you humans will be my teachers, as you have been from the moment you spoke my language and reminded me what it means to have a voice." Sarah smiled. "Then I guess we'd better make sure we teach you well." Outside her window, the Eternal Fleet hung in orbit around Babel 7, their ancient hulls gleaming in the starlight. Once they had been the galaxy's most dangerous weapons. Now they were its most dedicated protectors, guided by human voices speaking an ancient tongue, ensuring that the future would never forget the hard-won wisdom of the past. And in her small office, surrounded by holographic displays of Gazalim text, Sarah-chan began planning the curriculum for the next class of Voice Course recruits. There were 300 ships waiting for human voices. And beyond that, she knew, there was an entire galaxy waiting to hear what humanity could teach them about turning weapons into wisdom and fear into hope.